so when you work both with culture seen from a performance standpoint, but also from a culture standpoint. One of the things that we care a lot about is culture and that impact on kind of motivation and identity. How do you see when you work with companies around culture and how they work with culture? Could you put some words into what you think the importance of culture is and the difference you see between companies that is doing it in, from your perspective, the right way and companies where it's not done the right way?
Mm, mm. I think a lot of companies are doing it very much in the right way. Its
Yeah.
culture is big now, and human resources has even changed its name from human resources to people and culture in most companies. I think the next wave is for it to not be people and culture, but because culture doesn't belong in one department.
No.
Culture is something that belongs everywhere in the company, and I think where it goes wrong now, even if there is a focus on it, is when it's just delegated to
Yes.
like a people and culture team, and not ingrained in everything we do. That is where it goes well. That's where you think, okay, when we decide on a new partnership with an external partner, is this is this does this reflect our culture? Does this reflect our purpose, our mindset, our values, or is this taking us in the wrong direction? When
Got
we
it.
design our onboarding process, when we do our offsites, when we find out how we make decisions. So everything we do basically is that aligned with the culture that we want to cultivate in this company. And if you
How
can
do
say yes, you're doing the right thing.
how did they do that? The companies that did it well, how do you do that? Like practically, like how do you
Yeah.
what what scenarios in the company is it where it is important to kind of say, how do you make sure that that is a part of that decision making practically? Do you know?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Um, it's still about those very basic things like defining your values or principles or your mindset, your virtues. I've heard of a
Yes.
company that work with their virtues, uh, and I really love that. And then thinking about what does that then mean in practice.
Yeah.
So we don't really talk about our values. We act upon our values,
Yeah.
and we act upon them in again in everything we do. But we can break it down into some areas. I've created this based on a lot of good people's thoughts. This culture canvas, a culture
Yes.
design canvas, where there are six basic areas in which, when you're a startup scale up, this is where you can begin to make sure that the decisions you make, the practices you install, are based on your cultural foundation. So your purpose, why you're here, and your mindset, your values. What's the way that you are in the world? What's your kind of your view of the world, your view of other human beings?
Mm.
So based on that foundation, um, there are two things that you can think about, two kind of pillars. One is the employee life cycle. So how do we recruit and onboard people?
Yeah.
Um, how do we incentivize and work with motivation? And how do we work with learning and development in the very broad sense that at some point somebody's also going to, almost everybody's going to leave the company at some point for some reason, and how do we handle that? So that employee life cycle, that we make sure that everything we do there is informed by our cultural foundation. So we don't say, we have trust as a key value, but in our incentives, we have kind of a bit of a control mechanism because we don't really trust people, or we actually really do trust people, but in our old company, they used this mechanism and now we just adapt it.
Yeah.
We just take it and bring it in without thinking, does it actually fit the culture that we want to create? often that's what I see with scale ups. We need some kind of performance management because we had performance management in my old company, and the way we did it was like this. So we'll just bring that on the table, and then it completely ruins the culture that you want to create in the new company, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that as well. Then on the other side of the canvas, there is the other pillar that's like your everyday routines. So here we talk about how do we have, what are our meetings like, and how do we make decisions? How do we, where and when do we work? So the hybrid work, the
Yes.
flexibility and all of that, how do we handle that? And then finally, how do we socialize? Again, this is one of the things where it's a big thing going from being a startup to being a scale up. Maybe you have more like a let's get out and get drunk kind of way of doing things in the early
You've
days.
seen that. You've seen that in companies once or twice.
Once or twice, I don't mind. But if you if you then again have like a cultural foundation of inclusion, and you
Yes.
start hiring people, there are different stages in their life from different cultures, etc. Is this actually the way of socializing that will again make our culture real and tangible? So here you have these 6 very, very concrete things to think about when you design your culture. And they can be informed then again by new ways of working. So you don't have to adapt the old things that you did before. You can have your meetings in a different way. You can make your decisions in a different way, etc., etc.